Hi, my name is Jochen Eisenbrand and I'm Chief Curator at the Vitra Design Museum, and I would like to give you a tour through our exhibition Home Stories, 100 Years, 20 Visionary Interiors, in which we're looking at the history of the domestic interiors throughout the last 100 years. In this exhibition we're presenting 20 projects that represent important turning points in the history of the residential interior. And we're looking at this history backwards, meaning we're starting in the present, walking all the way back to the 1920s. In this space here, we're looking at the present situation. And when researching for the exhibition, we found that some of the most pressing issues today are, of course, the rising real estate prices, rising rents, particularly in inner cities. Hence, we're looking at space as a resource. One of the projects that is dealing with this topic is the Antivilla by Arno Brandlhuber, a project in the vicinity of Potsdam, near the city of Berlin, where he bought a former factory building and turned it into studios on the ground floor and the top floor into an apartment. We're showing some of the furniture that he used to furnish this apartment, a piece by Sana, the drop chair, another piece by Müller van Severen, also very minimal as the interior of the Antivilla. This model here shows the building that really kind of lay in ruins when Arno Brandlhuber bought it. A very simple cube. The apartment is on the upper floor. And in furnishing the interiors and conceiving the interiors, Brandlhuber went back to a concept that we actually know from the old times, from living out in the country, meaning living with the seasons, meaning that in wintertime only a small part of the surface is actually heated. He inserted a heated core that is cut off from the rest of the floor space by means of a textile curtain. So in the winter it's closed and only that part is heated. In the summer it opens up to the whole terrain. Another big issue today is that we need to repurpose existing buildings rather than always just tear down and rebuild because of the grey energy, the carbon footprint that buildings have. A good case in point is this project here by Assemble and the Community Land Trust, a community that engaged the architects Assemble to reappropriate a series of Victorian terraced houses in the city of Liverpool. All these buildings were completely gutted, everything in there taken out, and then repurposed, redesigned to fit today's living needs. As part of this project, the community founded a workshop called Granby Workshops, because this whole project is Granby 4 Streets in Liverpool. And they took the rubble from these houses to create products, to create interior furnishing elements, like these terrazzo tiles that we see in this display here, or these little knobs for cupboards or closets, which is very much about creating a sense of identity and also a symbol for the circular economy, which this project is a wonderful example for. In this part of the exhibition, we're looking at the time from the mid-1960s to the 1980s. As you may have noticed, we have a very particular exhibition design here that was conceived by Joseph Brimmer and his studio Space Cavia, based in Milano. The idea was that the exhibition design is a modular concept that is based on two materials, cork bricks that were constructed or produced particularly for the show, and polished stainless steel sheets on top of these podiums. The 1980s were the time of postmodernism, and that of course also left its mark on the domestic interior. Here we're showing as an example Karl Lagerfeld's interior or apartment in Monte Carlo, which is mainly an assembly of different pieces by the group Memphis that was founded in the early 80s in Milan. One of the members of Memphis was George Soden, who created these drawings that we see here, and another, the youngest member actually of Memphis, was Nathalie Dupasquier, who created these colored drawings that we see here. And we're showing them because we, in all our research, we actually did not find one truly Memphis interior that was designed from ground up, meaning including the floors and the wallpapers, etc. that was something that really only existed on the drawing board, on these wonderful drawings by Soden and Dupasquier, that really also create these wild patterns that are so typical of Memphis on the floors and on the walls. An ideal of domestic living for many up to today is the idea of loft living. And this idea first surfaced in New York, particularly in Manhattan and Soho in the 1960s. And one example, probably the most famous example for that, was the Silver Factory by Andy Warhol, the first of 3 factory venues he kept. It was the factory in which he created all his films throughout the 1960s, and where many renowned photographers came to document what was happening there. And we see some examples here by Stephen Shaw and Italian photographer Ugo Mulas. And what they show is that this was really a place of communal living of Andy Warhol and his superstars. It was a place of living, but also of working, of creating art. His famous screen prints, his films, etc. was also a place of partying, and it was a very mediated space because of the films he made there and because of the many photographs that were taken there. When speaking about interiors, one challenge is that you cannot show the thing itself in an exhibition. We opted against trying to recreate complete interiors in our exhibition because we think it never really fully works in a museum setting. One tool we decided to present are interior models, which were created by the studio of Charlotte Hyman and Herrero, based in New York and Los Angeles. And they found a wonderful technique to show the fleeting quality of interiors, which are never cast in stone, but currently changing and changed by the people who live there and who use them. This is the Silver Factory by Andy Warhol, and it's based on photographs of the times, plans that we found. And it doesn't say it was precisely like that, but it gives a sense of the atmosphere of that space at that time, what we assume it might have been like. As the society became more affluent in the 1960s, people started to travel more, spend more time on vacation. The holiday house, the holiday home became a topic. It also became a topic for architects more generally because of the possibilities of building with plastics, for instance with fiberglass reinforced polyester. This is an example from this time, the Hexacube by Greek-French architect George Candiles and Swedish architect Anja Blomstedt. It's about the idea of creating a home that is a holiday home that is built in the factory out of these fiberglass reinforced polyester components and then shipped to the site and very easily mounted from these parts. So we've walked further back now, and we're now in the time from the 1940s to the 1960s. And in the time of the 1950s, just after the war, new technologies invaded the household. So here we're looking at the duality of technology on the one hand and nature on the other. A wonderful commentary on this invasion of technology in the household of the 1950s was Jacques Taty's film Mon Oncle. And we're showing some pieces here that were created particularly for the film, a sofa and a rocking chair, later re-edited by Domopère in Paris. So these are not the original pieces, but re-editions made later. And then another chair, the Coquetier by Atelier du Recherche Plastique, that we have in our collection here at the Vitra Design Museum. And that Jacques Taty and his set designer Jacques Lagrange then chose for the furnishings of the Villa Apel, which is the main setting of Mon Oncle. A timeless living ideal is the Scandinavian interior. And the roots of the Scandinavian interior really go back to the early 20th century. This here is an example by Finn Juhl. Actually, the house he built for himself just outside of Copenhagen in Ordrup. He designed it himself and furnished it himself with the furniture that he created. And in it, he kind of executed a kind of furniture Darwinism. So he always changed the furnishings, and those he liked best of his own design, he kept, and the others then had to move out again. And the interior is an interesting example for the influence of natural shapes and forms onto the shapes of furnishings, and the influence of abstract art also. He was very fond of the work of Jean Arp, for example, but also displayed many other artworks of artist friends in his own house. The topic of nature also plays a big role in this project here, Casa di Vidro by Lina Bobardi, designed and built in the early 1950s in Morumbi, a neighborhood of Sao Paulo, which was back then still very natural, as we can see in this photo here that also serves as the main image, the key image of the exhibition. And we see Lina Bobardi leaning on the window of her Casa di Vidro, which is very much about large expanses of glass surrounding the main living room and opening up the interior to the surrounding nature. We chose 100 years as a time span for this exhibition, not only because it's a nice round number, but also because we would claim that the 1920s were a major starting point for the modern interior. On the one hand, because architects really started to think about residential space and had completely new ideas of conceiving a residential space, but also because the profession of the interior designer was emerging at that time. Regarding the domestic interior, the 1920s were also an interesting moment because many new apartments needed to be built. Case in point was Das Neue Frankfurt, probably the largest project of creating new houses, new terraced houses, apartments in that time. And interesting for a topic because the architects and designers not only conceived floor plans for these projects, but also conceived new furnishings. The most popular and best known example of that was the Frankfurt kitchen by Schütte-Lihotzki, which was not really one kitchen, but more a system, a modular system of kitchen furnishings that could be adapted to all kinds of different floor plans. The home story is kind of a genre in magazines, and it means that you get to know a person through the interior of his or her house or apartment. And we would claim that this was something that also started around this time in the 1920s. One example is Cecil Beaton, the famous photographer, set designer, artist, who in the 1930s bought a house, Ashcombe, out in the country in England, and then really completely furnished that from scratch and had it published in magazines like Vogue or Sketch, and even wrote a book about living in this house that he leased for 15 years, Ashcombe, the story of a 15-year lease. One particularly stunning example of the interiors of Ashcombe was the circus room, for which Beaton and a number of artist friends also created the circus bed. The bed shown here is a replica that was recreated after drawings and photographs that exist of that interior. Another type of exhibit that we commissioned for the exhibition was created by Adam Stech, a curator and designer who has his own studio, Ocolo, and whom we asked to create a number of mood boards for certain projects. This one is for the Villa Tugendhat by Mies van der Rohe. These mood boards are today used by interior designers to give a sense of the atmosphere of a space that they're about to realize. For these historic projects that we're presenting here, such mood boards did not exist, so we asked Adam Stech to create them after the fact. So he researched colors and materials used for these interiors and then put them together in this kind of collage. In the exhibition we also tried to keep a balance between well-known iconic projects and lesser-known surprising projects. This is one of the iconic ones, of course, the Villa Tugendhat, which is very important because of its space concept, the idea of the open flowing space that has really dominated the idea of the modern interior up to today.